In previous video, we saw how we can see the insights of APIs across your ecosystem and a bird's eye view of everything that is there to analyze when it comes to API traffic. Now, but what if I want to dive deeper into specific API and how they are performing? For that purpose, we have API inventory. Here, we get our familiar API overview view as well as an API inventory list as well. If I make it full screen, I get to see that there is a method and a resource path which are the key items in this view. I can see that there is a design, which is all the designs that are associated with this path, whether it's active or it's a zombie specification, which means that the API specification associated with this resource path is deprecated or outdated. It also gives an overview of when was this API last active, overview of traffic, which environment does it belongs to, where is the domain specifically coming from, what is the domain of the API, source type, domains, and overall compliance and success rate. All the details insights related to this specific API can be accessed by just clicking on this button. Before that, if you want to see all the list of transactions related to this specific API, you can click on this transaction logs. Let's dive deeper into this behavior insight of this specific API. Here, now we can see inside the API inventory, I'm inside this specific API. Here I get an overview card of what are the number of transactions, the type of API, the design associated with it, and its status. Based on the design associated, we get a compliance score. Out of 1,000 transactions, we get how many are following the API design versus how many are deviating from the intended design. Next is the security breakup. In APIwiz API security, you have an ability to define your own security policies. For example, I can have a request line validation where it checks these specific things and does an action if required or flags it based on the priority. Like this, you can build your own pipeline, which is visible here. These are all the API policies and rule groups that are active at this moment. Based on all these policies, the system is able to flag any transaction as secure or unsecure. So I can see a lot of transactions in this specific API are unsecure. But what if I want to see which specific rules are being violated? For this, you can come over here where you get a breakup of security threats. Here I can see that this specific rule, which detects MSSQL code execution and information gathering attempts at the endpoint, is being violated 891 times. Along with that, there's an extensive list of all the rules and rule groups, which is basically API security policies being violated by the traffic belonging to this specific API. The next part comes is the non-compliance breakup. As mentioned earlier, the design which is associated with this API has a lot of traffic which is not following the design. Here I can see that out of those transactions, 596 transactions were such that the header was not following what was defined in the design. To dive deeper into how are these 596 deviations behaving, you can go to the deviations section. As I can see, based on these sections, there are various tabs which group all the deviations. Please note that these deviations are with respect to the OpenAPI specification attached to the same endpoint. So I can see that expiration date has an excessive life parameter, which is this one itself, and it has 77 occurrences in the traffic. I can head over to specific header section. This tab only gives me all the extra headers that are found in my traffic. There can be some malicious headers here as well, and you can find out with the help of their occurrence and what is the reason of their deviation. For example, here I can see that the value is not matching the criteria. The most important highlight of this view is that you can filter all this data based on specific environment. So you can see what is the posture of your development environment versus production environment, and in that as well you can filter by either 1000 transactions, last month to date, and various time filters. Now that we have covered the security and security breakup as well as the compliant non-compliant breakup and its list of deviation, next we get a list of status code breakup. I can see that 200 OK and the positive responses are this much, as well as there's a lot of bad requests and unauthorized access. Based on this, I can make a call on what are the remedial actions that can be taken. Since APIwiz has an overview of all your API traffic, you get a risk profile associated with the specific IP. In this case, the risk profile is calculated based on the number of unsecured traffic sent by the source, as well as the structure, whether is it following the intended design or there are any extra headers which are malicious. So combining these two, you get a risk profile. As you can see, this specific IP has a more risk. In this case, I'll be able to blacklist this API or take any other actions by just copying this IP address and putting it in my policy. Apart from that, if you want to dig deeper into where is it coming from, you can click on this I option and you get the detailed breakdown of where is this IP belonging to. Its city, country code, latitude, longitude, and other details. The next section, we get the performance and data metrics. Performance metrics are the average latency, maximum average latency, P95 latency, and P99 latency. Based on this, you can gauge the performance of this specific API over time. And on hover, you get at any point what is the performance. Next is the data type. In APIwiz API security, you can define your own custom data types, which helps in compliance and flagging out the transactions which contain critical data. In this case, this can be configured in API security and going to data types and creating various groups. And for each group, you can have various fields which belong to sensitive data category in this case. Like this, there are many other groups. Based on this data, the system scans all the transactions and flags whether it contains any specific field which belong to a specific data type. In this case, I can see that 32% of the traffic is carrying personally identifiable information and passport details are 9.55%, which is 640 transactions. Like this, you can keep a track of how much is the consumption pattern of your API. Lastly, you also get geolocation data for this specific API, which helps you identify from where this API is getting consumed and if there are any specific concerned areas from which you are getting unintended API calls. You can take remedial options by also clicking on the client IP in this case, which is on the high risk profile. Combining this geolocation data with the IP risk profile, it gives you an overview of your consumption data and how much is the risk involved in it. All of this data is available for all your APIs. If I go back, all of this dashboards are populated for individual APIs. If I just click on this button and go inside, I'll be able to analyze those specific APIs. By combining OpenAPI specification compliance, API security threat data, IP risk profile, and data type flagging, along with the performance metrics, you get an overall view of how the API is performing in terms of API traffic as well as performance. That's it for this video. We'll see you in the next one.